Good evening. Greetings, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. This is a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So a little bit of both of those today, some progressive and some other forms of rock music. So we're here to do What's New. This is an episode that comes out every Saturday night. I try to get it out by 8 o'clock. That's my intention tonight as well. It's going to be featured on a band that just released this album on November 22nd. This is Opeth, and the album is called The Last Will and Testament. So it has basically 8 tracks on it. All the tracks, with the exception of the final track, have the sectional symbol at the front with a number beside it. And this is because they was explained that they read it as paragraphs because it is what they call a concept album, basically taken after the war, World War One, that is. So, anyways, I'm going to get into we'll get into the practical matters first, and then I'll discuss the song. So, I'll give you the stats first. So, the first thing is this was released November the 22nd. I'll put my book up here so I can read it easier. 2024. Recorded at Rockfield Studios in Monmouthshire, Angel Recording at London, and Hammersthorpe. I think this is called Flow Creation, The Tower in Stockholm. The album is about 51 minutes in length, which is not totally dissimilar. That a lot of albums fall within that 50 to 60 minute range now. On the Modabgadget record label, I think that's how you say it, Modabgadget, and Raining Phoenix. So Raining Phoenix was the other label. Produced by Mikhail Ackerfeld, Opeth, Stefan Bowman, and David Stewart. Those are the producers. So appearing on this album is Mikhail Ackerfeld on guitars, lead and backing vocals, as well as citra, mellotron, and percussion. Martin Mendel, I think that's what it is, bass and backing vocals. Frederick Ackerson, or Ackerson, maybe it's Ackerson, it could probably be Ackerson. Guitars and backing vocals. Joachim Svaldberg, piano, Hammond organ, mellotron, Moog, and backing vocal, as well as FX. And then the new drummer for the band, Walteria Väyrynen. Let's say that again. Walteria Väyrynen on drums and percussion. And then additional people that appear on the album. Excuse me for a sec. Ian Anderson on flute, on tracks or on sections 4 and 7, as well as The Story That's Never Told, which is the final track, and spoken word on tracks 1, 2, 4, and 7, or on sections 1, 2, 4, and 7 if you prefer. Joey Tempest on backing vocals on section 2, Mia Westland on harp, Mirjam Ackerfeld on spoken word on section 1, and then the London Session Orchestra on strings. There's a predominant part of them throughout the songs. So there are basically 8 tracks here, or sections if you prefer. So section 1, before we get into it, I was going to give you a bit of an overview of the album. So for those of you who are not familiar with Opeth, and I count myself among them, I only own one Opeth album. I just got it in the last couple of months, so they're a new band to me. Not new, not in the sense that I haven't known about them for years, but in the sense that I actually listen to them. I actually am quite enjoying the first album I have from them, and I think this one will fall well into that category too. So apparently this is the first album where the growl vocals are back on with the band. They haven't done this apparently for about 10 or 15 years. So that's involved. They have a multitude of vocal type music in this album. You've got some medium range vocals that are more mainstream. You've got some high and almost androgynous sounding vocals in at least one track. Anyways, you've got multiple vocals with the backing vocalist combining along with the main vocalist. You have some growls, and they often mix all of these together to create an effect. It's a very complex album. I find this band to be very complex. Their instrumentation is quite complex. The drumming is superb and very complex. The guitar parts are varied. You've got a lot of heavy metal sounding growling type guitars. You have some more pastoral sounding guitars, some acoustic sounding guitars, or slow guitar picking. So there's a lot of different guitar sounds going on here as well. The bass is not really dominant. There was a couple tracks in here where it was more forward. And then you have some lots of multiple instruments, flute, harp, all kinds of different keyboards, including like mellotron, organ, and even a couple of tracks where the piano was a little more predominant. You do have, of course, the flute is on here because Ian Anderson's playing it throughout the album. It's not dominating, though. This is not Jethro Tull sounding at all. So, yeah, some lots of really complex things, and an almost ever-changing soundscape throughout all of the songs. So they will go from heavy parts to more pastoral parts to more kind of classical parts, and then back and forth, adding the vocals in as they go in different ways. So very complex music, but I will admit I gave every track on the album no less than a 7 and no more than an 8. So it's pretty consistently high level album, I think. Definitely an album I'd like to have. So let's get on with a little bit of description, breakdown of the songs. So you have section 1, which is an opening. I think it's a mellotron they use here with some drums and percussion in the mid-range sound. Then it gets very heavy, really heavy guitar part, some drums and some complex instrumentation going on. The vocals are kind of a mid-range and mixed in there with some heavy growls as well. It's got this catchy up-tempo beat of heaviness when they're heavy. Then it has a little slow melodical part. It's almost like an interlude between noise, and then there's some noises in there too, like you might find on a Pink Floyd album. I would say that the vocals here towards the end are a little bit more of that mainstream sound with a great guitar soloing, and it kind of fades with an organ and an outlying sound. So I like this song quite a bit. It was a nice opening. I was up-tempo at this point. Second song I liked even better. Starts out with kind of an organ, some growl vocals here, and some heavy riffing part as they come in as soon as the organ part starts to fade a bit. Then you have this where they drop the vocals and become almost androgynous in their sound. Like it's hard to determine if it's male or female singing is what I'm saying. You've got some guitar riffing that begins to dominate, and then you've got this catchy kind of riff and organ that accompany it. You got more growls and heaviness throughout this album, throughout this particular track, and it kind of fades to a kind of slow organ sound. Then you have some alternating vocals, and they like to mix up the androgynous sound with the growls. It's very complex. All the songs are very complex. The next section, or section 3, section 3 we'll call it, opens with a kind of a synthesizer bit, and then they get really quite heavy again with the guitar parts and the keyboards, and the drums are very complex as well on this particular track. Catchy riffing, medium range, deep vocals, and then you have vocals that jump up to a higher tone, and then you got a catchy kind of complex riffing, and with the drums backing that. There's some melodic heavy parts, and then there is also some complex rhythm and instrumentation throughout this entire track. This one was a little bit of a meandering song, but not to the point where it was distracting. Just noticed that it would jump up and down, a little bit on the meandering side, but not bad. I did like it. The next song is probably one of my favorite 2 songs on the album. Very complex instrumentation. And the bass is a lot more prominent on this song. Very, very up front, and the production puts the bass pretty far up there. It's got a heavy, fast-paced and medium growl part to it, which is to the vocals, and intermittent as they go up and down on this, as they normally do on most of the tracks on this. This is one of the more complex instrumentations, probably the most complex song on the album. It's very fast-paced and then with some more pastoral parts that are attached to it. And there's actually an acoustic guitar and piano towards the end, which are kind of interesting. So I found this one to be very good. Lots of catchy rhythms here. I like this as one of the 2 songs I like the best on the album. We're going to do the back half of the album now. So the next track, track 5, starts out with a kind of symphonic synthesizer organ sound and some complex drum incursions throughout that particular part. And you got some medium vocals and almost spoken like. He's almost like speaking as opposed to singing. You've got some complex rhythms and multi-instrumentation throughout this track. The growls come back with this guitar solo. When they do the guitar solo, there's some growling involved with that as well. And heavy guitar and bitty parts or bitey parts, I guess, to the sound. The drums are, again, fast-paced and complex. Not every song is like that. He tends to be different on most tracks. This one is one of the faster-paced and more complex drum parts for the song. I found this to be, the overall feeling of this song is a little bit on the catchy for the total track, and then you have the vocals and the strings are catchy as well throughout this. So they have a little bit of that string quartet stuff going on. Track number 6, again, starts to get, the song's better than the previous one, but not much. They're all pretty good. It opens with a heavy organ part, and it's melodic and complex drum parts throughout it as well. You've got heavy guitars, followed by heavy riffing, followed by higher vocal parts overall. And then you got some growls in there as well. When it gets heavier, generally speaking with this band, when the guitar riffing gets heavy and dominating, the growls usually come out of the woodwork. I do like the drumming, and the guitar solo on this song is really good as well. The backing vocals are more melodic towards the end of the track. So, yeah, excellent track. So the next song is the other song that I think is probably my favorite on the album. It's got a very symphonic opening with some heavy guitar riffing. So you've got this kind of symphonic opening, and then this beefy guitar comes in and just becomes dominating. And then it kind of drifts a bit into the acoustic sounds with some organ there. And then there's some spoken voice, and I can clearly tell that it's Ian Anderson that's speaking on this particular track. He also adds his flute to it, but it's very, very low-key flute. It's not heavy flute like you might get on a Jethro Tull album. It jumps around from heavy to soft to back and forth with some growls and some more normal vocals in there as well. So that song, I liked it. Probably it's between that and track number 4, I believe, for my favorite 2 tracks. And then it ends with a song called A Story Never Told, which is the final track on the album. It opens with a quiet guitar part, jumps to an organ part with more drums and flute, and it's got that kind of quiety feel to it. There is some piano on this song. This is where the piano is probably the most forward of any of the tracks. Clear, medium-high range piano, I think. The multi vocals are thrown in here, so you've got lots of different sounding vocals going on with a melodic guitar and an organ that steps in as well. This is probably one of the better or more strongly symphonic, atmospheric sounds to it. The guitar solo dominates the back half of this track. Probably the strongest solo on the album is at the back. So there's lots going on this album. You won't get bored. The tracks don't really sound the same. They tend to like to mix all of their elements together. You've got your beefy, heavy riffing guitar and growly vocals, and then you have your more medium vocals with a more keyboard dominated part, and then you got some really quiet parts that are often the flutes in there, the acoustic guitars in there, maybe the piano instead. You got some string instruments going on, and you got a quieter vocally part. Sometimes they use multi-vocals, backing vocals in there as well. But an excellent album. I highly recommend it. If you're an Opeth fan, you won't be surprised at all. If you've never listened to Opeth, which I never did up until about a month or so ago, I had heard little bits and pieces of their stuff, but never really followed them, mostly the growl stuff, so I wasn't overly intrigued. But with this album, I think this is a great album. It could be one of my top 10 or 20 albums. It's probably going to be when I do my list at the end of the year for my top 20 albums for this year, it's got to be one of those albums. It's an album I'll be looking for when I go shopping this week or next week. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of What's New featuring Opeth's, I forgot the title already. Opeth's Last Will and Testament. Yes, of course. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please hit the like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. And if you have any comments about the album, if you've had a chance to listen to it, please put your comments down below. I'd like to hear what you think of it. I've actually not viewed any other person's review of it. I try not to do that. I don't want it to impede on my own thought process. Now I will probably, after I've done this, is uploaded, I will go and listen to other people's reviews of it. I like to hear if people hear the same thing, or maybe I'm missing something. That's always good too. So anyways, please enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will be back next Saturday night with another episode of What's New. So take care and goodbye.